This is Michael Ostrolenk, and welcome to Radio, where we explore individual and social transformation through collaborative action. I'm a psychotherapist with a transpersonal and somatic specialization. I'm also a transpartisan social entrepreneur and head instructor at SEALFIT's Unbeatable Mind Academy. Today's show is brought to you by Resilience Parenting, where martial arts instructors Chris and Holly Santillo share the insights they have gained as teachers and parents. They offer positive alternatives to lectures, bribing, and punishment, focusing instead on the three pillars of learning, integrity, and service. I encourage you guys to check out their book at resilienceparenting.info. Today's guest for O Radio is Jeff Grant. Welcome back, Jeff.
Hey, happy to be here.
It's great to see you. So Jeff is a coach, author, and ultra-endurance athlete. He's passionate about helping people overcome adversity and tapping into their flow state performance zones. Jeff has written several books on mind training and running, including Flow State Runner, Activate a Powerful Inner Coach's Voice, and Hill Running, Survive and Thrive. In 25 years of ultra-endurance sports, he has completed and coached athletes to finish some of the toughest events on the planet, including desert and mountain ultramarathons, Ironman Triathlons, SEALFIT Kokoro, and long-distance open water swims. These events have spanned the extremes of heat, cold, sleep deprivation, and stress. He is Swiss-American, living in Zurich. He enjoys swimming in the Swiss lakes year-round. He's crazy, even when that means cutting into ice to get in. I've seen pictures. It's nuts. Some of his latest projects include 2 new books, which he'll talk about today, as well as giving talks on anti-burnout and also teaching yoga retreats. Great to see you, as I said earlier, Jeff. Busy man.
Yeah, but loving life. Super happy.
Yeah, you look really happy. It's great to see you. So, we were just talking before we hit record, and you were actually on my show half a dozen years ago, if not more than that. Actually, I even think longer than that. And at that time, you came on to talk about your transition from the corporate space, the rat race, to the life you are now living as an amazing coach, traveling around the world, working with some amazing people, taking them through, reaching their goals, aspirational living, becoming amazing athletes for some of these crazy races that you teach people to get through. And just for folks who maybe have listened to that but don't necessarily know what you're up to now, can you kind of walk us through, since last time we spoke on air 6 or so years ago, what's the evolution of Jeff Grant from corporate creature to coach?
Yeah, I got to say it's always a work in progress. There's never an easy way to know what this journey is supposed to look like. There's no guidebook for it. When I decided, it was 10 years ago, I decided I wanted to leave a corporate job I had, and I wanted to dive fully into coaching. I didn't know what that meant. And this was the beginning of the days of CrossFit. This was the beginning of really thinking about mind training or like we do now, at least in the work that we do. So I had no idea. I just said, I want to work in coaching. And I gave up a good stable income. And I said, okay, let's figure out how this kind of business looks. And I think I might've shared the story when we last talked that at the beginning, I had one client, and I was happy to have one client. It was an endurance athlete, and I think she paid me something like $125 a month. So that was like the income for month one was $125, and my company called. I ended the corporate job. They said, "Hey, will you come back as a contractor and come back for just a few months? Like, we'll pay you really well." And back then, I thought, if I come back for a few months, I'll stay. And I really think I decided not to come back. And had I gone back, I'd probably be there now. Like, I really think that it's that temptation, the security, the income, and I wouldn't have chased the dream that I always wanted to chase. So I did it. I made the jump, and eventually built up more clients. Eventually was motivated to create my own gym. And that was probably around the time that we started talking, when I'd built up a good gym business in the early days of CrossFit, at least in Switzerland. And I was doing a lot of work for SEALFIT. I was traveling back and forth. And I really went into a period of life then where I said yes to every opportunity. If I had a chance to do a motivational speech, Yes. If it was a team building, yes. Any chance I had to coach anywhere, whether I was paid by the hour or paid for the week, I said yes. And after some years of doing that, it became very difficult to juggle everything. And I felt like I was super, super busy and not really moving forward. I was happy as a coach, but I wasn't really creating the income I wanted. I wasn't really doing things I thought in a smart way to make it sustainable. It was fun, but to make it sustainable. And I was just frying myself. Trips to California, 9-hour time difference, and then trying to run right back in and manage the gym business and meet with people and do corporate kind of jobs, do it with motivational speaking. It was just, it got to be, I think, a bit too much. And at the same time,
let me also add, let me add to that too, though, because not only from Zurich to California, but you're also traveling to Thailand. You're into the whole yoga scene there as well. So you're globally traveling all over the place.
Yeah. It was a bit, and I was doing some charity work in Malawi, so I was in
Africa
a lot.
right?
So there were a period of years that it was my suitcase was always packed.
Yep.
Always doing things I loved, whether it was charity work or teaching or learning yoga. And this is something I kind of skipped over. There was a huge learning phase I had to do. I had the passion and I had a lot of experiences in life, but I didn't have a lot of the structured knowledge at the beginning, at least. So there were a lot of training courses and I mean, yoga, meditation, a lot of fitness things. There was a lot of education that was happening at the same time I was trying to actually teach, learn to be a coach by continuing to try to make myself better. And
if I remember correctly, it was yin yoga that you were studying in Thailand. Now you teach in Thailand, which is cool.
Yeah. As a ultra endurance athlete, I was good at going hard and doing crazy sports. And I loved yoga from back in the 90s when I started doing yoga. I always found a lot of flexibility and mind stillness in yoga. There were a lot of things from the earliest days and me experiencing yoga that I really loved. But I'd always done hard yoga. I was like, handstands, hard arm balances, like a very challenging yoga practice that would calm my mind. But it wasn't calming my body like I needed it to, and it wasn't creating the balance that I needed with all the hard work. So when I found the yin style of yoga, my body actually responded. My flexibility improved better than it had for years of doing a harder practice of yoga. And I found it very calming.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. You and I'll paraphrase, you talked about kind of the tension between saying yes to everything, traveling around, doing the training, teaching, coaching, giving talks all over the globe. And what I'm hearing you say is more recently, you're like, no, I did a lot of really cool stuff. I learned a lot. I helped a lot of people, but I wasn't moving forward like I wanted to, which I would imagine require you more no's and yeses. But I'm kind of curious about that because I wonder if that's a natural tension that's required for almost everyone on this kind of lifestyle design path, that you couldn't start with no's. You actually almost have to say yes at the very beginning for a certain period of time through the process, and then get to the point where you're able to say no and have stronger yeses. Or do you think it would have been actually possible for you at the very beginning to like, no, I don't want to do everything. I'm going to be, a little bit clear on my boundaries and say no more?
It's a great question. And, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. I borrowed that quote. And at the beginning, I needed the work and I needed the growth experiences. I needed the learning experiences. And I also needed to experience being overloaded and a bit burned out.
Yeah.
And a lot of those, the moments of feeling overwhelmed with a coaching business, I use that as information to try to help people now. So I think there is a buy-in. There's a period of time, and it may be a cycle. Our next conversation could be another discussion on having a period of overload and having to make decisions. But for me, I knew I wanted to write.
Yeah.
I really, really wanted to write my first book, and this is going back a few years. I really, really wanted to give corporate talks, to be a motivational speaker. And I'd done that kind of as a hobby but never really as a profession. And I wanted to work with with a smaller group of people and try to make a bigger impact in their lives. So I'd spent a lot of years, telling people to do push-ups and to go running and coaching them at their side. And I still love that work, but I wanted to move into the mentoring and just helping them more in the big picture of life. And that was the goal. And I had reached a moment where I realized the only way to get there was to trim to start saying no, just trim some things away. And I'd sold my gym. I reduced the number of people I was coaching. I essentially cut to write the book. My first book, I cut my income almost to zero. And then I wrote a book, not as a famous, novelist who's going to get a publisher to, give them a retainer or whatever for a year. I just wrote it and hoped it would turn out, hope I would finish and it would turn out as a good book, and then I would sell a few copies and maybe it would open some doors.
How did you deal with that space of the unknown? I mean, to almost bring your income down to zero so you write your book almost sounds like a deep calling, from inside out, but a lot of lack of security there. How did you deal with that unknown space?
Oh, it's funny. If you ask me during the moment, on days when I was writing well, I would say, hey, it's easy. You follow your passion. And if you want to write. And then on the 2 months or so that I would just shut down and I'd write 2 chapters, and then I would have 2 months where I would get nothing done with the book, I would say it's a terrible feeling. I made a horrible mistake. I need to get all the clients back and start saying yes again. And there was really a wave waves I kept going through until I was about 80% finished with the book. And then I got a phone call. And it's funny because something similar happened when I left the corporate world. I get a phone call, and now I'm starting to panic because I've been without much of an income for a large part of a year. And it's from a colleague from an old job, and he had a startup and wanted me to come work in the startup. And he's, I'll give you stock and blah, blah, blah money. And I thought, well, here we go again. Like I have decided I want to do something for myself in my life. And now this temptation has shown up. It's money, it's an income, it's doing what I don't want to be doing anymore. Do I take it or do I say no? And in this case, I said, hey, thanks so much. Maybe I'll call you in a few months, but I have to finish this book. I said, I'm 80% finished with the book. I think I can finish in another month. Well, I was honestly probably 50% finished, but that created motivation to push through another 2 months of writing. And I finished it. I got it done. And it really didn't matter how well it sold or what happened next. Like when I got the book, they dropped off a shipment of books outside the house, and I ran outside and I grabbed the book. I looked. Funny story. I looked at the book and it was misprinted. The pages were all off. And,
oh my God.
I had this moment of excitement when I saw the book I wrote actually in print. And then this moment of panic a few days before the launch party in Zurich, when I saw that the pages were just moved off to the side, and it was one box of several boxes that were off. So I had to go through all the books and figure out which ones were misprints. But it's funny, this huge joy, and then, oh no.
Holy God.
But I felt like it made the whole journey to get to the point of having something you want to produce, you're passionate to produce, it made it all worth it.
It's interesting because when I'm hearing you talk about that story, it sounds like the hero's journey. And on that path, there's always temptations to pull you off your own path.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
you fought against those temptations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, I mentioned 2 of your books, but you also have 2 books that you have coming out relatively soon. Are you allowed to share anything about them with us?
Yeah, I can share a little bit about that. And I just finished, which will be book 4. It's called Running Heavy, and this is a book that's inspired by me being an overweight kid. And I was always, I don't know if you remember this. Do you remember husky jeans?
Yeah.
They don't have husky jeans anymore. But as a 70s kid, us larger kids, we would wear husky jeans. And I remember my mom would buy my husky jeans, and I was always kind of embarrassed that I had these a little bit wider jeans. I was a big kid. I played center in football. And then in junior high, when I was 12, 13 years old, I was starting to get conscious about my size. And I really wanted to be less overweight. I wanted to be athletic. and I joined the wrestling team, and I was terrible. I was not a very good wrestler at all, but I did the conditioning work, and part of that was running. And it was at that time I really started to love running, but I was a heavy kid, and the movie Vision Quest was out then, and this was a wrestling movie. The guy would train in plastic trash sacks, so garbage sacks, to sweat more. This was the thinking and you could make weight. And for guys who were seriously competing and trying to go down a weight class, that made sense. For a 13-year-old, not very good at wrestling, there's no reason to be doing this at all. But I would plod through my neighborhood, overweight, in my sweatpants and covered up in my plastic sack so I would sweat more. And I fell in love with running as a teenager then. And from then on, it's been something that's been important to my life. But I've also been very sensitive to what it's like to be overweight. Coming out of college, I gained a lot of weight. I became very inactive, and I decided I needed to lose weight. And I did that with running and getting into triathlons, marathons, and ultimately ultramarathons. So this journey of being an overweight runner is something I always wanted to write about, to try to encourage teens and anyone with extra weight on their body to safely get into running.
I have to imagine too that it's also metaphorical, because at least a lot of overweight folks that I've worked with therapeutically or in the coaching space, they carry a lot, not just physically weight, they carry a lot of baggage, emotional, mental baggage. So I have to imagine that, there's also that piece as well that you've accounted for yourself, for your own growth and development, but also, when you train folks who might start overweight and they're working towards losing that weight.
Yeah, exactly. So I like to think of it as you can be running with extra internal weight, so weight on your body. You can be running with extra mental weight, so the stories, the stress, whatever it is in life that it's hard to let go of. And then kind of on the tactical athlete end, you can be running heavy in weight vest. You can be running heavy pushing sleds and dragging things. So those are the three elements that I write about in this book. And then I provide training plans and just some motivation, inspiration for people that fit into the categories of an athlete or anyone wanting to push, pull, or carry more weight, or just probably the more typical, having the mental weight or the weight on the body.
Speaking of carrying weight long distances while running, I recall videos you have done at one point for SEALFIT, I believe, running in the mountains, right, in Switzerland?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I've done some fun things with weight vests and rucksacks, and I love the mountains. I'm a mountain guy, and when I lived in the U.S., I always loved being in the mountains, doing things. Ever since I was a kid, I love being in the woods and the mountains, and I'm still super happy if I can be hiking, running, or doing anything in the mountains.
Nice. And so that was one book. You're soon to be released, but you mentioned there's two books.
Yeah, so I did something a little different this time. Before I even finished the book project I was on, I started on the next one. And I've learned this about myself that because I'm working on book 5 now. So I have a cycle. There's a time of year when I'm productive writing and a time when it's just wasting my time for me to try to write. So coming into the winter cycle works. And last year I made good progress on a book and then lost motivation coming out of the winter. So this time I decided to start early and go hard. And I got one project finished and decided to immediately start on the next one to leverage. And I jumped right into the next project. And this is a book on ultra running. And it's similar to some things I've written about in Flow State Runner, but very specific to the world of training for and racing in ultra marathons.
Nice. Do we have dates that you expect these to be released where people can check them out?
Yeah, I'm hoping to be announcing a December release for the Running Heavy book.
Oh, nice. That's soon. Good.
And and it could be that that's for an online and ebook release, and not long after the ultra running could happen. And I just say that with a smile because I need to be writing for the next 2 weeks to finish it. So it's outlined and a lot of it's written, but I can't commit until I actually finish the work. But it's I've got good momentum going.
Well, seeing you on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you're obviously an amazing athlete. You've done some amazing challenges for yourself, the swims, the ultra marathons, et cetera, et cetera. So physically, you're a stud. I'll say that
Uh,
nicely. I think you are. Yeah, I'll say that. But I'm curious, like, what do you do internally? What are what's the inner work you do that helps you match your athletic abilities?
no, good, very good question. I want to acknowledge that first. Um, I thank you for the kind words. I've worked with a lot of amazing athletes and people who have really risen above adversity. So it's hard for me to hear. It's hard for me to hear that. I love challenging myself. I've never been someone standing on podiums. Yeah, I've had friends and I've worked with Olympic athletes and really some incredible athletes who do just a great job. I've never been in that group. I've been in the group that's struggled to do things,
Hmm.
which has helped me help people better, I
Yeah.
believe. But I love taking on huge challenges, and I love it if it's like I look at my body and say, well, I don't think this is a body for ultra distance swimming, and then just figure it out how to do it, and that's, to me, a lot of energy comes from that. To the question on inner work, uh, like I have to deal with fears. I have to deal with worries. I love ice swimming as an example. I love doing very cold swimming, but
Hmm.
every time I stand at the edge of the ice or at the edge of a very cold lake, I have to breathe. I have to visualize. It never gets easier.
Hmm.
I'd love to say, yeah, it's easy. And someone might grab me on video, jumping in the ice and say, yeah, this is great. I'm happy. What you don't see is the minutes before when I'm meditating or I'm visualizing and I'm trying to bring that calmness down, or bring the calmness into the picture that maybe in my mind is not quite there yet. So I think the tools that I teach people, and I know you teach people, those mental tools, we have to use them on ourselves and believe in them ourselves.
Right. How about interpersonally? So, I was just having a conversation with a client yesterday. Someone could know the material as a coach, like they know everything about whatever they coach about, but they don't necessarily have the art, the skill set in terms of engaging another human being. And I'm wondering, for you, is that something that came naturally, that you had the ability just to inspire, motivate your clients, or is that something you learned over time? What were some of the hills you had to climb, if there were any? Speaking of hills, since you're a hill seeker, in order to develop the capacities to engage another human being in that way?
Yeah, super good question. I remember the first time I coached someone in a CrossFit workout back in 2009. I learned in that moment I had one very good coach's voice, and that was the motivator.
Okay.
Mr. Positive Energy Motivator. It's the voice that I like to hear. Someone saying, you can do this, you got it, come on, man, you're doing great. That voice,
Mhm.
that's my natural voice. And I remember this guy doing wall balls, and I was right there beside him as he's doing wall balls. And I'm like, I grabbed the ball, I'm doing it with him, like, come on, man, you got this. And he slams the ball down and just looks at me and says, everything you're saying right now, everything you're doing is making this worse for me. And he walked off, left the workout.
Holy shit.
I was gutted. I was like, here I'm thinking, man, you're a pretty good coach. And this guy just told me I was a terrible coach for him. Now you should have your own, leave that. But the lesson for me was I needed to remove myself, step a layer back and think, I'm here for the athlete. I'm here for the person. I'm here for whoever I'm speaking with and supporting. I need to use the voice or the voices or the approach to help them, not necessarily what I want for myself. And that was a big moment. And I needed to step back. And over the years, as I coach people, as I help develop coaches to coach other people and teachers to teach others, I always had that in mind. How can you read a situation, read a person, and then select an angle and a voice and a way to reach them with them as the priority. And you can still let yourself be there, let that authentic you be there, but it may mean you say just one word to them, or you take a video and just show them the video. I remember as well coaching more advanced athletes or teaching people who were better athletes than me. Ego is involved. My ego, their ego, that's a difficult thing to manage. And the thinking then was, okay, how do you diffuse ego? How do you bring it down a notch where everyone can move forward and no one's insulted? And it's always a challenge, but there's energy that comes in trying to unlock that challenge.
Would you say that your meditation and yogic practices have been helpful to decondition your ego or create some space between you and your reactive mind, if you want to put it that way, your ego? So you're more able to listen to what they need as opposed to how you want to show up in your own head for them?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the biggest takeaways, one of the biggest lessons we can have from a meditation practice is being able to see ourselves from the outside, to witness ourselves. Sometimes I think of it as like being a drone flying overhead. And I used to call this the blimp, and then we had drones, but before I used to think it was a blimp flying overhead and just looking down. So if you've got that as a daily practice,
yeah,
even if it's a few minutes, and this is something I try to talk to people about a lot. Meditation's a wonderful thing. Visualization, breath practices. I love having a morning ritual. Before I wrote my first book, I had a huge morning ritual, and that going through that ritual for half an hour or so, it enabled me to make very good progress on the book. At the same time, sometimes these morning rituals can become such a big ask to do daily with everything else in life, that because it's a big ask, someone says, well, I don't have the 15 minutes or the 20 or the 30, so I'm going to cut the whole thing. And I really try to encourage people, even if it's a 5-minute practice, even if it's setting a timer and breathing deeply for 3 minutes, and then just observing thoughts or focusing on the breath as you take each breath in, or counting breaths for 2 minutes, that basic practice, that consistent practice, it does make an impact on how you view yourself, how you react to things during the day.
Right. So we talked a little bit about some of your physical training, some of the inner work you've done. What about diet and nutrition? What role does that play for you as an athlete and for you as a coach?
I'm getting uncomfortable with the question here.
Are you eating a piece of cake behind the scenes?
No, not eating. No, but maybe later. No, I've being just very open here. I've struggled with weight forever. I mean, I talked about being a heavy kid.
Yeah, right.
Being a light kid, and then losing weight in high school, then gaining weight in college, and then this cycle. It continued through my 30s. It's continued into my 40s. I've had some. Usually, I develop the body for the sport I'm doing. So the years I was very much into ultra marathoning. At the time, I thought I was fat, and I'd look at the photos now, and I was really lean and gaunt looking, like a lot of ultra runners look. But then I transitioned into this SEALFIT CrossFit world, where I became much stronger, put on a lot of muscle, the body changed. I spent years very focused on yoga, the body changed again. And then I went through a whole cycle focused on long distance swimming and cold water swimming. The body adapts again and changes. So during all of those years, there's been moments when nutrition has been very dialed in, and what I would say very, very clean, more structured, and I felt very lean. And there's been years when I've thought, I'm training so much, I don't need to be this clean with nutrition. And then my body says, cool, then I'm going to give you a lot of extra fat to carry around.
Got it.
So that's also, I think as we age, it becomes different as well. And it's the metabolism changes, maybe the sport changes, the daily activities change. So the reason I said uncomfortable is because I'm right in a moment of trying to figure out what my nutrition should be. In my late 40s, doing the things I'm doing now. And I still train hard now. I still have all the outdoor sports I love to do now. But it's not something I solved 20 years ago and then put on a shelf and just continue.
Right. I think you make a great exemplar then for folks who are having those same difficulties, the ups and downs. But I think it's also amazing too, how you just talked about how your body adapts to what you're training towards and working on. I'm just curious. I know you live in Switzerland. Are you actually up in the mountains where you live presently?
I'm close to a lake. I'm close to Lake Zurich now, and it depends on how you define a mountain. A small mountain is right outside my door.
Nice.
The mountains you can ski on are about 15 minutes away, and the big mountains are within an hour away.
Since you spend a lot of your time in nature, can you talk to us a little bit about the effects you've seen? Like they talk about biophilia, is the new science that explores how nature has an effects on human physiology, immune function, cognition, stress, et cetera, et cetera. Having gone from the corporate world where you're a rat in a maze running around to living in a beautiful place like Switzerland with the mountains and the lake, et cetera, have you noticed a shift over the time, just in terms of your perspective, your overall health and well-being, recognizing that you put yourself under an immense amount of stress with some of the physical activities you do?
Yeah, difficult question for me to decide which angle, because there's the where you're living in countries and cultures and infrastructure, and also just having more outdoors time. So I think I'd like to take the question first, just from the more time in the outdoors, more time in nature. I still have to spend time in nature, even if it's not my job and I'm not working. So if it's something I still need to go for myself and be in nature. I'm fortunate now that as part of my job, I also take people into nature, and often I'm taking people who are experiencing burnout or breakdowns, are very, very, very stressed with jobs. Oftentimes these are high-level managers, people with a lot of responsibility, and they've reached a breaking point. Or it's people with addictions or other things that are happening in their life they're receiving treatment. And part of that treatment is to spend time in nature.
Nice.
And it's so interesting for me to see. I'm not giving them therapy. But we're in nature, we're hiking up a mountain, we're walking, we're paddling on a lake, and you just see this peace come to people. And you see them start to look around. At the beginning, maybe their mind is everywhere else. Maybe it's on a phone if they have their phone with them, and I can't make them put the phone away. But I don't want to force someone to look at a waterfall. I don't want to point out, what a beautiful tree that is. What I love to see is when they actually, on their own, connect with the world that's around them, and they start to heal and receive some peace just from beautiful nature around. And yeah, that's anywhere in the world that has nature, you can have this connection with it in this experience.
I think it's awesome that you intentionally bring your clients into that space, especially the ones who are close to burnout or already are burning out, recognizing the extreme value of a natural surrounding to reducing stress, improving immune function, improving cognition, et cetera, et cetera. So good for your clients, man, for both the physical training you offer them and the beautiful locations you offer them to train in. Social media, where can people find more about your work, your books, lectures, anything you got going on?
I thought you were going to ask, how do I feel about using social media? And that was going to be another, I was already ready for this.
Okay, we can go there. How do you feel about using social media? Before you talk about all your social media accounts.
Love, hate. Go ahead.
That's all you want to say about social media?
Love, hate relationship with social media in general. I love, and this is I'm echoing something that many people say, but I feel it. So I love the positivity. I love the connections and discussion, and I'm a team-oriented person. So I love the idea of us being humanity, helping each other through life, across cultures, across whatever language you speak, where you live, what you love to do. I love the idea of us moving forward. That part of social media I love. The part of the negativity on social media, it aches me.
Yeah.
So I'd love to use it to connect to people. I have to use it in my business for marketing.
Yeah.
And I keep trying to master not caring about the negative stuff. And that's just hard. It's hard to be selective. I think you do a great job with what you put out on social media, with sharing things and getting people to discuss and consider things. I look up to you on how you do this.
Thank you.
And even if it's things people don't, the audience may not all agree, but it's putting out good content, good for discussion, and not just upsetting people and forcing one way of thinking. That's the
I'll tell you something really funny. I appreciate the compliment. So I went to an ancestral health conference in Berkeley many, many years ago. And I ended up having a conversation with a guy. We follow each other on Twitter, but we actually never met. And he said, I love the stuff you put out on Twitter, but what happens to you about twice a year? I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, you're pretty calm and cool and centered the whole year. You ask questions, you put out content, blah, 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 blah. But twice a year, you just seem to go a little nuts, get really angry. I'm like, yeah, that's probably true.
well, that's
I thought that was like the best thing. He tracked me over years. Like you can see, know that twice a year I'm a little frustrated with certain topics.
yeah.
Oh man. So okay.
So your original question.
Yes, you on social media. Where can people find out about your books? Working with you as a coach?
Yeah. So in general, hillseeker.com is my main website. Hillseeker is my Instagram and Twitter tag. So there's good, easy to find me there. And on Facebook, I have a page. I think Coach Jeff Grant, Jeff Grant Coach and Author, something like that. So a few different places I'm around.
Nice. Now, usually we just kind of close out by saying thank you, Jeff, for coming on. Blah blah blah. But we're going to do a little differently. You're going to play us some music, right? And while you're getting your instrument to play some music as we finish up today's conversation, I actually do want to say thank you for coming on, Jeff. It's great to reconnect with you, hear what you got going on. Congratulations on your soon-to-be released 2 books. Make sure to include in the show notes, links to your previously written books and your other work as well. And maybe like a minute of some music would be great.
I'll just show you my ukulele. That's I got to say, with music, I've never been a professional musician, but I studied music in college and I love it. I have a few dozen instruments around my house. And for me, this is how, when I'm trying to write or be productive, and my mind's all over the place, this is one way I calm my mind. This is picking up an instrument, playing on the instrument. And ukulele is just a nice one. Whenever I'm traveling, I like to bring my ukulele with me because it's easy. It fits in the suitcase.
Jeff Grant, thank you.